Hey guys, Abdi Movie Recaps here. This ship flew in space for 923 years, but after landing it turned out that the entire crew mutated. Today, I am going to explain the story of the 2009 movie called Pandorum. Stay tuned until the end of the video. Have a great time. In 2153, a space probe discovered the planet Tanis, suitable for life in deep space. At that time, the world's population was over 24 billion people. Mankind was short on food and the necessities of life. 20 years later, the battle for resources on Earth has become extremely fierce. Then the Elysium spacecraft was launched towards Tanis. The huge ship has been on its way to Tanis for some time. Suddenly the crew receives a message from Earth. It says that the crew and passengers of the Elysium are the last people of mankind. Another indefinite amount of time passes. A man on board suddenly awakens in a hypersleep pod. He takes off his oxygen mask, convulses and screams loudly, but no one comes to help him. Thanks to the inscription on the capsule, we learn that this man is Corporal Bauer. Finally, he manages to cut the wires and get out of the capsule. Bauer gradually comes to his senses, pulls the mucus off his body and pulls out the catheters. But the man can hardly remember anything. There are obvious electrical problems aboard, so Bauer finds a flashlight and looks around. This is how he finds Lieutenant Peyton's capsule. This name sounds familiar to Bauer. The corporal puts on his uniform and finds a picture of his wife in his locker. After that, the man tries to get on the captain's bridge, but the door does not open. Bauer can't understand anything and with a scream hits Lieutenant Peyton's capsule with a piece of rebar. But he doesn't wake up. After that, there is a powerful surge of electricity, and the lieutenant's capsule opens by itself. Peyton tries to recover from his stasis and also doesn't remember anything. The men assume that their watch is about to begin, but it's strange why no one has woken them up. Bauer thinks they are alone on this ship, and they were awakened by the navigation computer. The men do not remember where they are flying, nor their mission. It's impossible to get to the bridge without electricity. Peyton turns on the backup power in their quarters and tries to radio for someone. Bauer finds a tattoo on his arm suggesting that they are Group 5. The men do not understand what happened to the fourth group, which must now prepare for anabiosis. It's also a mystery where the third member of their team, Lieutenant Cooper, went. His capsule is empty. Suddenly, the men hear some sounds in the ventilation system. Peyton suggests that Bauer climb up the vent and look around in the other compartment. The corporal takes a communications transmitter with him to talk to his commander and sets off. Nothing can be seen in the tube, but Peyton promises to monitor the subordinate's movements and guide him. Power surges are getting worse. This means that the ship's nuclear reactor is now off and trying to come back on, but it needs a reboot. There is still no way out of the ventilation shaft. Bauer becomes uncomfortable, he can't breathe. He's starting to get nervous. Peyton makes him laugh and calms him down. The lieutenant then recalls that the shift change was supposed to take place every 2 years. If they are members of the fifth group, that means that only 8 years have passed since the start of the flight. At this time, Bauer falls down the shaft and ends up at the ventilation hatch on the lower level. The man lights a lantern and sees the dead Lieutenant Cooper next to him, who, judging by his condition, was stuck here several years ago. Bauer makes a dash, kicks the hatch and falls into the lower compartment. The connection with Peyton is interrupted. Bauer explores the room in which he is trapped and finds many human pods. Clanking sounds can be heard in the distance. Bauer sees a girl with his flashlight and starts running after her, but she quickly escapes. Finally, the corporal appears to think the girl has stopped. But as he gets closer, he sees that the frozen figure is not a girl, but a man who has long ago harmed himself. While Bauer examines the find, the lurking girl knocks him down and confronts him. She looks wild and makes the corporal take off his shoes. But then a growl is heard in the hallway, and the girl runs away in terror. Bauer shines his flashlight around and notices the outlines of strange creatures. Then he puts out the flashlight and prudently hides in a back corridor as well. Some creature rushes down the corridor at a wild speed. It is a creepy roaring monster with spiked fangs all over its body. He smells Bauer and is looking for him. The man hides in a corner, holding his breath. But at that moment the connection with Peyton resumes, and he loudly calls Bauer to the phone. This gives the man away, and the monster attacks him, trying to wound him with his spear. But Bauer presses himself into the wall and remains unharmed. Soon the monster leaves, taking the dead Lieutenant Cooper with him. Then the frightened Bauer gets in touch with the commander, terrified, tells him what happened and asks him to call the rescue team in any way he can. But Peyton says nothing will succeed, because he remembered something. Elysium is not designed to go backwards. They are the cargo, 60,000 people traveling toward Tanis. After these words, Bauer too sinks into memories. When the probe first landed on Tanis, he was a child and watched the live broadcast, saw his father and mother. Water, plants, and everything necessary for human life were found on the planet. The decision was then made to send the first settlers to Tanis. With that in mind, Bauer realizes that the journey on the Elysium is a one-way trip. The man thinks of his wife again, but can't remember if she is flying to Tanis or not. Bauer is very nervous and wants to go in search of his wife to save her from the monsters. Peyton asks the corporal to calm down and concentrate on saving the ship. Bauer listens to him and finds a non-lethal weapon. He then asks Peyton to find him a route to the reactor to restart it manually. Bauer sets off and suddenly feels a strange jitters. He fears that this is how the symptoms of the insanity that astronauts call Pandora manifest themselves. It all started when an officer on a 2-year watch on a spaceship called Eden had a nervous breakdown. He went crazy, decided their flight was cursed, and ejected 5,000 passengers into outer space. Of course, no one survived. Remembering this, Bauer tries to shake off thoughts of the Pandorum. The man continues to move down the corridor and discovers a motionless man. Suddenly he regains consciousness, and Bauer saves the unfortunate man. He turns out to be a member of the 6th group, for some reason long awake. Realizing that Bauer is unaware of what is happening on the ship, the man begins to slather on some brown liquid on himself. It is necessary to neutralize their smell and escape from the monsters. Suddenly, the men hear the monsters growling, run away and hide. But the monsters do find the officer of the 6th group and drag him after them. The creatures are intent on killing the man. Bauer tries again to save him, but nothing works. Then he runs to save himself. The man runs through the corridors, but soon stumbles and falls from a great height. Bauer is saved only by a rope, which he miraculously clings to. The communications transmitter falls off the ledge and communication with Peyton is lost. The monsters pursue Bauer, but at the last moment a nimble guy with a spear comes to his aid. Having escaped the chase, the men hide behind the gate of one of the compartments. The savior's name is Meng. He speaks a language unknown to Bauer, but he looks friendly. From the tattoo on his arm, the corporal realizes that his new comrade is from the agriculture group. After that, Bauer goes to the food supplies. This is where the nimble girl he met earlier jumps on him. But now Meng comes to the guy's rescue. While fighting ensues between him and the girl, Bauer fires his gun into the air. The two wildlings are frightened and heed Bauer's words. He says they have to stick together and asks them to escort him to the reactor. Meng shows signs that he knows the way. The roar of monsters is heard again, and the three of them start moving. The girl's name is Nadia, and she thinks that the way to the reactor is too dangerous, because no one has ever returned from there. But Bauer believes it is necessary to save the ship and land it by all means. Nadia gains his trust and tells him that she woke up 6 months ago. She puts her hand to the lock on one of the doors and waits for something. The monsters start getting close to them and they desperately need to escape. But Nadia tells them to wait. Soon the door opens and, having fought off the monsters, the company runs into a bright room. The friends end up in the environmental compartment. Nadia has lived here all along. She accompanies the embryos of the animals and plants that are to settle on Tanis. On Earth, the girl worked as a geneticist. She and her colleagues spent 7 years collecting samples of Earth's biosphere to create life on the new planet. Listening to Nadia, Bauer recalls that it takes 123 years to fly from Earth to Tanis. The girl gives the corporal a cricket to eat and suggests that Elysium has been on the road for well over 8 years. Meanwhile, Peyton tries to break down the door and get to the captain's bridge. Suddenly he hears a strange sound in the ventilation pipe and closes the hatch just in case. Later, the sound is repeated, but instead of a monster, a tormented man in strange slime appears out of the hole. He begs for help, and Peyton helps him get out. The guy's speech is incoherent. He trembles and says in a weak voice that he is Corporal Gallo of the 4th group. Gallo had been on the captain's bridge and now found himself in this state. At this time, Bauer and his crew arrive at the crew's anabiosis bay. Almost all of the capsules are empty. According to Nadia, people were taken by monsters. Meng is wary, staying still among the pods, and Bauer wants to go back to him, but falls down under the floor on the way. Nadia follows him. The friends find themselves up to their shoulders in a muddy liquid and find a lot of filth here. Above them, a monster walks among the pods, but it soon goes silent. Then the friends make their way to the surface. Bauer cautiously shines his flashlight into the darkness, and the monster immediately attacks them. The corporal gets tangled up in the wires and begins to feel the symptoms of Pandorum. But watching the monster overpower Nadia, Bauer comes to his senses and rushes to the girl's aid. A fierce fight breaks out. As Bauer and Nadia fall to the floor, Meng appears. The friends gather their last forces and attack the monster from 3 sides, but then a second monster appears. It bangs its spear against a wall and calls out to a crowd of its brethren. The 3 of them run away quickly. Peyton, meanwhile, brings Gallo to his senses and asks what happened on the bridge. He says that 2 other members of his team were possessed by the Pandorum. Tom had to protect himself. But Peyton doesn't believe him. Nadia continues to lead her friends to the reactor. Suddenly they notice an inconspicuous cabin with a closing hatch and decide to rest after the monster attack. But another man named Leland shows up in the cabin. He turns on the lights and informs them that he has lived here for a long time. Afterwards, Leland cooks a meal for his friends. Meanwhile, Bauer discusses with Nadia where the monsters on the ship came from. The girl thinks they used to be people sleeping in pods. But these people woke up a long time ago and began to mutate because of the accelerator, a synthetic food enzyme that was fed into the capsules. The accelerator was supposed to help humans adapt to the biosphere of Tennis, but it helped the monsters adapt to life on the ship. Leland overhears this conversation and decides to tell his friends what he knows. Gallo finally comes to his senses and begins to haunt Peyton like a ghost. The lieutenant keeps a tranquilizer near him to calm Gallo down if anything happens. The young corporal paces the room imposingly, listing the symptoms of Pandorum and advising Peyton to look for them in himself. With these words, Gallo is about to tell Peyton the terrible truth. His story echoes that of Leland, who at the same time begins to tell his friends his side of the story. When the Elysium journey began, all of the passengers were asleep. This went on for several years. At this time, the captain's bridge had a change of crew every 2 years. Everything went smoothly at first, and then the 4th group took over. The crew received the last signal from Earth. An apocalypse happened there, and life was lost. So, the people aboard the Elysium were the last humans in the entire solar system. The only people awake on the ship at that moment were Gallo and 2 of his colleagues. After the message from Earth, there was total anarchy aboard the ship, and Gallo massacred the other members of the crew. The only survivor got bored after that. He began to bring out of anabiosis everyone who came to hand, and to have fun with them in a peculiar way. He ended up thinking he was a king. All who tried to live according to reason were destroyed by him. Soon the Mad King grew weary and fell back into anabiosis. At this time, the awakened humans mutated, and evil spread through the ship. During this story, Bauer and his crew become uncomfortable with the poison that Leland slipped into their food. They lose consciousness. Peyton is having a hard time too. He suffers a powerful shock when he learns that Earth no longer exists, and that there is total mayhem on Elysium. Digesting the information, Peyton feels the symptoms of Pandorum. In doing so, Gallo hypnotizes him with a frantic stare. There is a power surge on the ship, and Bauer and his friends come to their senses. While they were senseless, Leland tied them up and hung them upside down. The savage man has culinary plans for the company. Bauer tries to talk Leland into letting them go and lays out his plan to restart the reactor. Leland has been awake among the monsters for years and is not inclined to believe in a miraculous rescue. But he notices that lately the voltage is spiking more and more often, which means that the reactor will soon stop, and there will be nothing left of the ship. Bauer insists that the reactor must be restarted immediately. The corporal promises that no one will judge Leland for his past gastronomic atrocities, for he was simply trying to survive in this hell. These words impress Leland, and he releases the prisoners. Bauer immediately convinces his friends that they are a team and contacts Peyton on Leland's radio. According to Bauer's data, Peyton calculates how long the reactor will last. The friends have 47 minutes to do everything. Peyton then lines up a route to the reactor. All 4 friends hit the road. Suddenly they meet a baby mutant. Meng tries to kill him, but Nadia asks that the child be spared. The child immediately starts squealing and calling for adult monsters. It turns out that the monsters are breeding. The friends are immediately pursued by a group of monsters, but they manage to hide. Peyton doesn't give up hope of getting to the captain's bridge, the control center of the ship. But Gallo makes gloating speeches about how Bauer can't restart the reactor because he lost his skills during anabiosis. which means there's no need to steer the ship anymore. Gallo insists on the need to catapult out of the ship in order to live a few more days. Bauer's team gets into the compartment where the families of the crew members were. But all the capsules are empty. Then he remembers that his wife was never on the ship. She was probably unable to have children, and they wouldn't take her aboard Elysium. Even before the flight, she dumped Bauer so he could fly without remorse. Thus, she saved his life. Suddenly, Bauer notices Peyton's wife's capsule. He immediately recalls some important information about Peyton himself. The friends continue on their way and come out to the reactor. The insane Gallo insinuates to Peyton that the reactor will not withstand a reboot. But the commander orders him to shut up and wait for Bauer to fix everything. Meanwhile, Bauer himself is trying to approach the reactor over the flimsy bridge. The structure cracks, causing one of the monsters to awaken in the depression around the reactor. This is where the nest of mutants is located. There are several hundred of them here, but they all sleep peacefully in the rays of radiation. The awakened monster growls a little and goes back to sleep. And Bauer continues on his way. Suddenly, the rusty bridge comes off its mounts and almost falls down, but Meng grabs it and holds it up. However, Bauer falls off and flies down almost all the way to the pit with the mutants. Meanwhile, Nadia runs to the reactor and begins the restart process, but cannot complete it without Bauer's help. He himself carefully goes down into the mutants' nest, takes pieces of their skin and wraps them around to hide the human smell. The conflict between Peyton and Gallo heats up. The corporal goes out of his mind and wants to eject. He points a tranquilizer gun at Peyton and forces him to begin the process of catapulting the capsule with Gallo inside. But the lieutenant launches only a simulated catapult and closes the corporal in the capsule. He becomes hysterical and shouts curses. And Bauer, in his new guise, cautiously makes his way through the bodies of sleeping mutants to the stairs leading up from the pit. But Leland, who was illuminating the room from above, accidentally drops the flashlight into the hole. The mutants wake up, start growling and looking for the source of the noise. Bauer has no trouble getting to the top, and Meng finally drops the broken bridge into the hole. The surviving mutants notice Meng and rush toward him. The man throws his spear into the crowd and runs away down the corridors. The reactor is seconds away from stopping, but Bauer manages to restart it. Panic ensues among the mutants left in the nest. Looking at what's going on, Leland runs toward the captain's bridge. Peyton is about to go to the control center, and Gallo in the capsule starts talking in riddles. He calls Peyton a corporal and reproaches him for all his sins. Bauer and Nadia wait for the monsters to quiet down and run away from the reactor. And Meng faces the head mutant in the corridor and gets into a fight with him. The monster is strong, but Meng kills him with his own pike. After that, the guy notices the baby mutant. The creature makes an innocent face at first, but suddenly slashes Meng's throat with a fast jab. Gallo gets out of the capsule and approaches Peyton with a gun loaded with tranquilizer. It's like the lieutenant has double vision. A fight breaks out between the men. The corporal immobilizes Peyton, and suddenly their bodies begin to fuse. After a dose of the tranquilizer, Gallo disappears altogether, and Peyton feels relieved. Then Leland comes running to the captain's bridge. He begins to recount his experiences, but Peyton quickly eliminates him. Nadia and Bauer also make it to the control room. At the same time, Bauer already realizes that Peyton is not who he says he is. The false lieutenant sits in the captain's chair and admits to himself that he is in fact Corporal Gallo. He was the one who received the last signal from Earth, and after that he killed his crew and didn't go into anabiosis. It was he, Gallo, who set in motion the process that caused the passengers of Elysium to mutate. And after having played around for a couple of decades, he fell back into anabiosis, but this time in someone else's capsule, which used to belong to Lieutenant Peyton. Gallo opens the illuminator, but no stars are visible behind it. While Nadia tries to figure out their location by looking up, Gallo tries to awaken Bauer's symptoms of Pandorum. He talks about how wonderful it is to give in to one's fears and forget about morality. Gallo believes that laws and morality have ceased to exist with the Earth. But Bauer is of a different opinion. Suddenly Nadia notices sea creatures passing overboard. This means that the ship has long since arrived on Tanis and lies at the bottom of the sea. Then the logbook shows that the voyage has already lasted 923 years instead of the 123 years. People could have awakened 800 years ago and lived peacefully on Tanis without mutants. Upon learning this, Bauer has a Pandorum attack and fires a shot into the electric panel, supposedly to dispose of a mutant. This damages the hull of the ship, the glass cracks, and water starts to flow in. Bauer quickly grabs Nadia and leads her to her pod. Once inside, he triggers the launch of the pod. A mutant attempts to break the pod, but is hindered by the approaching water. The capsule rushes upward, but the water makes it increasingly difficult to breathe. Bauer puts an oxygen mask on Nadia and holds his breath. Soon their capsule reaches the surface, the door flying off to the side. The friends come to their senses and see the dry land up close. Just then, more than 1,000 more intact capsules with survivors emerge from the water. They all ejected automatically due to damage to the ship's hull. Only Gallo and the mutants remain aboard the sunken Elysium. Thus began the first day of life on Tanit. So, what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recap like this. Until we meet in the next video, stay safe wherever you are.